Have you ever tried to answer questions from immigration officers after spending 12 hours on a plane with barely any sleep? When you're exhausted and foggy, even one uncertain answer can quickly change a routine passport stamp into a 30-minute interrogation in a back room. Your mind is cloudy, your legs feel numb, and suddenly you're standing in a bright immigration hall with an officer ready to question you. Even people who travel frequently make mistakes in this situation. And from the officer's perspective, even a small moment of hesitation can be enough reason to start asking more detailed questions. This guide will explain the 13 most common questions that immigration and customs officers use to quietly test whether your story checks out. You'll learn how to answer each one in a natural, confident way that won't raise any suspicion. Before we discuss the actual questions, let's clear up something that confuses many travelers. Immigration focuses on you as a person. This includes your passport, your visa, your reason for entering the country, and how long you plan to stay. Customs focuses on your belongings. This covers items like food, medicine, cash, electronics, and luxury goods. These are two separate checkpoints with two different sets of rules. There's also something else to know. Some countries are much stricter than others. Beyond the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia are particularly well known for their intense questioning. Their officers can get very personal and often focus quickly on small details. What does this sound like in practice? You'll see examples as we go through each question. Whether you're landing in Los Angeles, London, or Sydney, the reasoning behind these interviews is almost identical. Once you understand what officers are really trying to find out, you'll move through that line like someone who understands the process, not someone just hoping everything works out. Let's begin with the first simple sentence that quietly starts the entire interview. Question 1. Can I see your passport? On the surface, this seems like the easiest question possible. An officer looks up and asks to see your passport. You hand it over without thinking twice. But this moment is actually when the real interview quietly begins. They're not just looking at a document. They're looking at you. They're watching how prepared you appear, how fast you respond, and whether you seem like someone who has their trip organized or someone who's already struggling. This is why your passport should never require a search. By the time you reach the front of the line, it should already be in your hand, opened to the photo page, ready to give to the officer. You shouldn't be digging through your backpack or checking every pocket trying to remember where you put it. This is where a small travel wallet becomes useful. Look for something around 4 by 6 inches in size. It should be large enough to hold your passport, ID, a couple of credit cards, your boarding pass, baggage claim tags, and a pen. That's everything you need. Nothing complicated. During your trip, keep this wallet in a zipped outer pocket of your personal bag so you can grab it with one quick motion. When the officer says, "Passport, please," a simple "sure" or "here you go" is all you need to say. This sends a clear message. This traveler planned ahead. How you handle this small moment sets the tone for everything that follows. A smooth, simple handoff helps calm your nerves because the next question is where they really start examining your story. Question 2. Where are you flying in from? This might sound like casual conversation, but it's not. When an officer asks where you're flying in from, they're mentally mapping your travel route and checking whether it makes sense. They're listening for two things. First, does your answer match your ticket? Second, does your route pass through any locations that get extra attention? These include places with recent health problems, conflict zones, or countries known for high rates of people overstaying their visas. Where travelers create problems for themselves is when they start telling their entire travel history. Well, I was in Thailand for a while, then I stayed with friends in Germany, and before that I went home for a few weeks, but originally I left from. By the third part of that answer, the officer has stopped following your story. Now they're wondering what you might be trying to hide, even if you're not hiding anything at all. You're not there to share your complete travel diary. You're there to give one clear answer that matches your trip. Something like, "I flew in from Atlanta with a connection in Paris." That's enough. Starting point plus any obvious layover. Keep it short, keep it consistent, and this question ends in seconds. Have you ever seen an officer frown and ask you to repeat where you flew in from? That brief moment often leads into what they ask next, especially when they get to the topic that makes everyone a bit nervous: how long you're staying. Question 3. How long are you staying? If there's one answer that can turn a simple stamp into a full interrogation, it's this one. To you, it's just a date. To them, it's a test. They want to know if your plans sound clear, specific, and legal, or if they seem vague and open-ended. People who truly intend to leave on time usually answer in a clean, specific way. People who haven't thought it through tend to give uncertain answers. Here's a real example. A friend named Maria arrived in the UK from another European country with her children. She planned to stay at a relative's home while waiting for a residency visa for a different country. When officers asked how long she would stay, she answered honestly, "I'm not really sure." They took her aside, made her prove she had enough money in her US bank account, and lectured her about not living off the UK or using their healthcare system. She did eventually get in, but she never forgot how embarrassing it felt. All of that happened because of one naive answer at the desk. This example shows how much stricter places like the UK can be with this question. The solution isn't complicated. Your answer needs to sound like a trip, not the start of a new life. Try answers like 10 days or 1 week for vacation. If your trip covers multiple cities, you can still keep it simple: 3 nights total. 1 in Milan, then 2 in Zurich by train. Don't add phrases like, "unless I decide to stay longer," or "unless my friend invites me to extend my visit." That one small addition can lead to more questions, extra checks, or even a side room visit you didn't plan for. Why does this feel so serious now? It has everything to do with how much data officers can see on their screens. In the US, your entries and exits are recorded. In Europe, the new entry/exit system does the same thing for the Schengen area. For the officer, it's like playing a game of guess your visa limit, except the computer already knows the answer. When they ask how long you're staying, they really want a simple, believable time frame that fits within those rules. Get this right, and you've cleared one of the biggest obstacles. Next comes something that feels much more personal: why you're there in the first place. If you're not careful with this one, you might spend half your day in a conversation that seems to go on forever. Question 4. What's the purpose of your trip? You've made it through the question about how long you're staying, and then comes the question that can completely change the atmosphere: what's the purpose of your trip? By this point, they know your length of stay and roughly where you came from. Now they're trying to put you into a clear category in their mind: tourist, family visit, short-term business, study, or something else. The fewer question marks in that category, the faster you move on. The word that causes the most trouble here is work. Picture this: you're entering Australia and you say you're there for work. Get ready for follow-up questions. What exactly do you do? Who are you meeting? Why does this have to happen in person instead of online? None of this means you've done something wrong. It's just how seriously some countries take anything that sounds like you might be doing local work or taking a job. So how do you answer without lying, but also without creating a cross-examination? Keep your reply brief but specific enough to match your visa type. If you're on a tourist visa, keep it straightforward: "I'm here on vacation." If you're there for business, "I'm attending a conference in Chicago." This kind of answer signals that your documents match your story. If your trip has more than one purpose, maybe you're staying with relatives and also planning to do some sightseeing, lead with the main reason that matches your visa. The side activities can stay in the background. This way, your story feels simple and lines up nicely with whatever is already in their system. Think of this question as a quick reality check. When your words match your paperwork, things usually flow straight to the next step, where officers shift their attention from your trip to your background. Question 5. What do you do for work? Few things feel more awkward than explaining your job to a stranger in a uniform who barely looks up from their screen. When they ask about your work, they're trying to answer 2 quiet questions in their head. First, do you have a way to pay for this trip? Second, what kind of life is waiting for you back home? You don't need a lengthy, polished speech for this. Direct answers work best. I'm a teacher. I work in marketing. I'm a student. That's enough for them to form a picture. People create problems when they start adding extra details. I just left my job, but I'm looking for something new. Now they're wondering if this is really just a visit or the first step in relocating. But what if you actually are temporarily unemployed? Here's a way to be honest while still sounding like you have your life together. I finished a project and I'm taking a short break before the next one. Students can say, I'm studying economics, or I'm in my final year of engineering. Freelancers might mention their field. I design websites, or I do content strategy. For travelers who are retired, you don't need to describe your entire career history. Just say, I'm retired. For most older travelers with a return ticket, that answer alone puts you into one of the lowest risk categories. You're clearly not there to compete for local jobs. Unconventional jobs still count too. I once told a US officer with a straight face, I'm a YouTuber. He gave me a look like something from a comedy show and asked, is that stable? One sentence about it being my full-time income was enough. Once it fit into his mental picture of real job, he moved on. Sometimes this question comes with an additional part. Do you have sufficient funds for your stay? They want to know you won't need to work illegally or depend on government assistance. Having proof ready, like a credit card, a prepaid hotel booking, or a recent bank statement, shows you planned ahead even if they never actually ask to see it. You're not trying to impress anyone at the border. You're making your story make sense. Some type of work, study, retirement, or a clear break between projects, plus a trip with an obvious ending. Once they're comfortable that you have something solid waiting at home, the next question usually shifts from who you are to who you're traveling with. That's where things can get surprisingly intense if you're not traveling alone. Question 6. Are you traveling alone? This is when the interview stops being just about you and starts including everyone around you. Are you traveling alone? Is how an officer checks who's actually connected to your trip and whether what you say matches what's on the booking in front of them. For example, if your ticket was booked together with someone else's name, they'll expect to hear that person mentioned. Or if you've checked in as a group but arrived separately, they might ask about it to make sure everything adds up. They want to confirm there are no secret companions hiding in baggage claim. To avoid any panic moments, here's the smart way to handle it. If you're traveling by yourself, a short reply works perfectly. Yes, I'm traveling alone. Say it in a steady, normal tone. Solo travelers get this question all the time. It's not automatically suspicious. If you're with others, keep it short and specific. I'm traveling with my sister. She's right behind me in line. Or, I'm with my husband and our 2 kids. No family history, no relationship complications. Just who they are and how they're related to you. Now let's discuss the part that worries people most, traveling with children. One viewer shared that when she landed in Sydney, Australian immigration officers briefly separated her from her preteen daughter at the border because the system showed the child was already in the country. Officers treated it like a possible kidnapping situation before realizing it was a database mistake. They apologized and offered lounge access to make up for it, but the scare stayed with her for years. If you're traveling with children, especially if they have a different last name or one parent isn't there, think one step ahead. Bring whatever documents are common for your route, such as a birth certificate or a letter from the other parent. Also prepare your kids so they won't freeze if someone in uniform asks, "Who are you traveling with?" and "Where are you going?" The same prepare ahead approach applies in certain cultural situations too. In parts of South Asia or the Middle East, a woman traveling alone might hear questions like, "Who is meeting you?" or "Where is your husband?" A short, steady answer usually closes that discussion quickly. Question 7. Do you have any family here? This question can immediately confuse your thinking. You want to be honest, but you also don't want to say something that suddenly makes you sound like you're planning to stay permanently. From the officer's perspective, family is just a way to measure how strongly you're connected to this country. It doesn't automatically count against you, but a rambling, confusing answer can turn a quick check into a longer conversation. If your answer is no, say so and move on. No need for comments about having no one waiting. You're not performing in a drama. You're answering a basic question. The mental challenges really begin when the answer is yes. You have an aunt, a cousin, a sibling in that country, and suddenly you're wondering how much to share. Here's the right balance. Enough detail to sound genuine and grounded, but not so much that it becomes a family newsletter. Just provide the basics. Yes, my cousin lives in Toronto. Or, my sister lives in San Francisco. I'm staying with her for a week. Some travelers start talking too much. Well, my cousin's husband's brother moved here first, then his parents came over, and we might stay longer if. At that point, the conversation stops sounding like a visit and starts sounding like a soft launch for moving there. If you're there for a specific event, that can actually strengthen your answer. Yes, my aunt lives here. I'm staying with her for 5 days for my niece's graduation, then I fly back on Monday. In one sentence, you've given them a real reason for being there, a place to sleep, and a built-in end date. That's exactly the kind of story that fits comfortably alongside your return ticket in their system. The key with this question isn't to hide your relatives. It's to avoid wandering into open-ended territory. Who they are, roughly where they are, and how your visit fits into a trip that clearly ends. That's all you need. The next thing they often ask is whether this is your first time dealing with their border, because your past entries and exits can reveal just as much as whatever you tell them today. Question 8. Have you been here before? You're standing at the desk, almost through the checklist, and then comes, have you been here before? This is where many people create unnecessary problems for themselves. Your brain starts rewinding. Was it 2018 or 2019? Was that the wedding trip or the work trip? Did I use my old passport or the new one? The harder you dig for dates, the more tense you appear. Here's what actually matters. They already see your travel history on their screen. Entries, exits, old visas. It's all displayed in a neat timeline. They're not testing your memory. They're checking whether what you say fits roughly in the same time frame as what they see. If this is your first time, no, this is my first time. You can even keep it light if that fits your personality. No, first visit. I'm brand new here. If you've been before, you still don't need exact dates. Yes, I was here about 2 years ago. Or, yes, I came once on a work trip. Nobody expects you to remember the exact day of a stamp buried in your old passport. As long as your answer sounds reasonable compared to their records, this question ends in seconds. Trying to recite your entire travel history out loud usually makes you sound confused, not more trustworthy. Up to this point, it might feel like casual chat with someone wearing a badge. But the next question is where tired travelers really start making mistakes with one careless no. Question 9. Do you have anything to declare? This is the question that can quietly turn a smooth arrival into an extended session of questions. By the time you reach this point, most people are in just let me out of here mode. You see the exit doors. Your brain goes on autopilot. That's when many travelers quickly say no, without actually thinking about what they're bringing into the country. The interesting part is that customs usually aren't searching for dramatic contraband like in movies. Most of the time, they care about very ordinary things: medicine, food, expensive jewelry or electronics, and larger amounts of cash. Their job is to protect farms and wildlife, keep dangerous or fake medications out, and make sure major purchases are properly declared. That's why older travelers with pill organizers, blood pressure medication, or medical devices are usually fine, as long as it's clearly for personal use and declared when required. The catch is that certain items, especially food and plants, can trigger extra checks even when your intentions are completely innocent. And the more it looks like something was discovered by surprise, the messier the situation tends to become. So how do you handle this question without creating drama? Take a breath and run a quick mental check. Anything new and expensive, any medications or medical equipment, any food or homemade items that might fall under special rules. If you're unsure, don't be afraid to speak up and let them guide you. I have prescription medication and some sealed snacks for personal use. Do those need to be declared? That one sentence keeps you in the honest and transparent category, not the said no and then got caught category. People who speak up and ask questions rarely have the worst experience at customs. The real problems usually start with a confident no, followed by a surprise discovery. And if you think that's the end of the difficult questions, the next one has a habit of revealing who actually planned their trip and who was hoping to figure everything out at the border. Question 10. Where will you be staying? The moment you hear this question, the tone shifts slightly. Until now, you've been talking about the past and big-picture plans. This one is very straightforward and very practical. Where are you actually sleeping tonight? For the officer, your accommodation anchors your entire story. In their mind, it's a bit like opening the front door of their own house. People who can answer immediately usually have their plans organized, while vague replies tend to stretch the moment longer than necessary. Picture this. Someone says, somewhere downtown? Maybe a hotel near the river? That kind of answer is enough to make them keep asking questions. Their job is repetitive and routine. When something doesn't quite fit in their mental picture, they ask more questions until it does. The version that keeps things moving smoothly sounds more like, I'm staying at the Pacific Hotel in Manhattan. If you're staying with relatives or friends, mention it, I'm staying with my cousin in Toronto for 5 nights. Having your accommodation details ready keeps the process moving. But what if your trip isn't a simple, one city, one hotel situation? Just start with the first definite stop. I'll be on the Coral Princess cruise out of Miami, then one night in a hotel near the port after we dock. When your answer feels solid, the next step is almost automatic. Some officers will want to see the bigger picture on paper or on your screen. That's when you hear the follow-up question that catches many people off guard. Question 11. Do you have your itinerary or hotel details? In some cases, an officer will ask to see your itinerary if your answers start sounding a little too rehearsed. They might say things like, which cities are you visiting? Or, do you have your itinerary or hotel details? It can feel intrusive, but it's really a simple test. Does the story coming from your mouth match the story in your bookings? Here's something I witnessed at LAX. An officer asked the passenger in front of me a very basic question, where are you going? Instead of answering, the man snapped, that's none of your business. The officer tried again, and the man started giving a speech about privacy and freedom. Less than a minute later, he was being escorted away, and everyone else in line was quietly thinking, I definitely don't want my trip to start like that. The immigration desk is the worst place to turn a simple question about your plans into an argument. When they ask to see your itinerary, they're not asking for your personal diary. They're checking that your flights, hotels, and dates match what you've already told them. So how do you make this easy and even somewhat impressive? Here's a simple method I use. Before the trip, take screenshots of your hotel or Airbnb confirmations and save them in a single offline PDF. Airport Wi-Fi has a special ability to stop working the second you need to open your email, and nobody enjoys watching you scroll through a spinning loading symbol while the line grows behind you. You don't need a thick paper folder unless you prefer that approach. You're showing the exact same thing you'd show at hotel check-in. Get this habit in place now, because the next question is where officers stop asking about where you're sleeping and start asking whether you're actually leaving. Question 12. Can I see your return ticket or onward travel? Right after checking your itinerary, the officer usually moves to the next major question. This is the moment they check one simple thing in their mind. Is this trip going to end when it's supposed to? For most short trips with a round-trip ticket, this part is easy. Your flight home is booked, the date sits comfortably within your allowed stay, and it matches what you've been saying at the desk. You pull it up, they see an exit date, and everyone moves on. Now let's discuss the trickier version. Maybe you're not flying straight home. You're going to another country, doing a long loop, or connecting multiple regions. In those cases, a later flight or confirmed onward booking can work just as well, as long as it shows you're finishing this part of your journey before your time runs out. Just be careful if you plan to use a bus or train ticket as proof of onward travel. Some countries don't consider that sufficient to get you past the counter. The most difficult case is one that many long-term travelers encounter. You could legally stay for a long time without a visa, and you honestly haven't decided when to leave yet. In your mind, I'm not sure, I'll figure it out later, sounds flexible and open. At the border, it sounds like you arrived with no finish line. That's exactly the type of answer that makes an officer pause and start wondering what you're really planning. Here's where a little strategy helps a lot. Choose a realistic departure date that fits comfortably within your allowed stay. Book something you can change or cancel, and build your plan around that. A practical suggestion: Services like Best Onward Ticket create a real, time-limited flight reservation in your name that you can show as proof you're leaving. The key is to make sure whatever you show is genuine and verifiable. If an officer types in that booking reference, it should actually exist in the system. By the time this question ends, you've answered 3 big things without saying them directly. You know why you're here, where you're staying, and how you're getting out. You might feel like you've cleared the major hurdles and you're almost done. But in some countries, there's still one last layer. They want to know whether you've actually prepared for the worst-case scenario. Question 13. Do you have travel insurance? This question doesn't appear on every trip, but when it does, it quietly separates casual travelers from those who have thoroughly prepared. In some parts of the world, travel insurance isn't optional at all. For Schengen visas, you may be required to have medical coverage of at least 30,000 euros before they even give you the visa sticker. Countries like Cuba or Saudi Arabia might ask to see valid travel insurance when you arrive. The idea is simple. If you get sick or injured, you're not stuck in their system with no way to pay. Travel insurance really is that boring little document that becomes a lifesaver the moment your luck changes. Do you know how much that insurance can actually rescue your trip? A delayed flight turns into a covered hotel night. Food poisoning becomes a clinic visit instead of a 4-figure bill on your credit card. Lost luggage? Frustrating, yes, but reimbursed, not a complete wardrobe emergency. Imagine this happening to you. It's day 2 of your trip. You rent a scooter, the ocean is sparkling, the road is clear. And 5 minutes later, you're on the ground, staring at an $800 bill for an X-ray, cash only. At that moment, "I'll be fine" stops sounding brave and starts sounding very expensive. Experienced travelers understand that preparation is what separates a great trip from a stressful one. Even if nobody asks for proof at immigration, having insurance says something important. You've planned responsibly, so your adventure stays exciting rather than destroying your savings. When you're preparing for an international trip, don't just think passport, ticket, hotel. Quietly add one more thing to that list. Proof that if the worst day happens, you already have a plan. All those questions at the border really come down to a few things: who you are, why you're here, where you're staying when you're leaving, and whether you can handle problems if they arise. Under bright airport lights, it can feel personal. But for the officer, it's just routine. And for you, it becomes much easier when you've already thought through your answers and know exactly where your documents are. If you have an international trip coming up, save this guide and review it quickly before you fly. A couple of minutes of preparation at home can make that immigration desk feel like a simple formality instead of a surprise quiz. Think about this. What's the strangest or most difficult question you've ever been asked at immigration or customs? Where did it happen?